The desert had no mercy. Not for the sunburned, not for the starving, and especially not for the lost. Clara staggered through the sparse trees, her boots worn nearly through and her cotton dress now just rags clinging to her bones. Dust-coated. Her skin and her lips were cracked from days without water. Her stomach ached with emptiness, but she'd gone too far past hunger to even feel the pain anymore. Now there was only desperation. She didn't know how many days she'd walked. The last town had driven her out when they found out she had no husband and no money, just a name. A child's name and a faded handkerchief tied to her wrist. For Lydia, it read in crooked embroidery. The sun hung low when she finally saw it, a small wooden cabin nestled in the trees near a dry creek bed. Smoke curled from its chimney. Her heart thudded. Someone lived here, someone who might have food. Maybe kindness. She hesitated on the edge of the clearing, brushing her tangled hair behind her ears and wiping her dirty hands on her skirt. She didn't want to look like a beggar, even if that's exactly what she was. Her pride had cracked long ago, but a sliver of it still whispered, "You're not worthless." Not yet. She took a shaky step forward and then another until her knuckles tapped on the heavy wooden door. At first nothing. Then boots thudding against floorboards. A deep rumbling voice spoke from inside. "Who is it?" Clara licked her lips, forcing her voice to work. I don't want trouble. I can clean. I can chop wood. I'll clean your whole cabin for just one plate of food. Please." A long silence stretched behind the door. Then it creaked open and a pair of eyes stared out at her, dark, intense, unreadable. The door opened wider. The man who stood before her towered over her, broad-shouldered and straight-backed. He wore deerskin leggings, a linen shirt rolled up at the sleeves, and moccasins dusted with trail dirt. His long black hair was braided back, a single eagle feather tucked behind his ear. He was Apache, she could tell by the bone choker around his neck and the flint blade at his side, but what stopped her heart wasn't his size or his silence. It was his face, his expression. He was staring at her not like a stranger, but like someone he knew, or someone he had seen in a dream long ago. His eyes widened the faintest bit. His jaw clenched. He didn't speak. Clara's legs trembled under her. She took a step back. "If it's too much to ask, I'll go." "No," he said suddenly. His voice was low, hoarse, like he hadn't used it in days. "You're hungry." She nodded, unable to speak. "Come inside." The cabin was small but clean. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the smell of cooked meat made Clara's knees go weak. She stood near the door while the man moved silently, grabbing a clay bowl and filling it with thick stew. He set it on the table and motioned for her to sit. She did, slowly, still watching him. He didn't look away from her, not even once. She took a bite. It was warm, savory, filling. The stew tasted like heaven. "Thank you," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. Still, he said nothing. Just watched. After a few bites, she asked, "What's your name?" He hesitated, then replied, "Dakota." She blinked at the name. It stirred something faint in the back of her mind, an echo of a memory, but she couldn't place it. "I'm Clara," she said. That's when the spoon in his hand snapped. He had gripped it so tightly the wood had splintered in two. She jumped at the sound. He set the broken pieces down gently and stood, walking to the window. "Clara," he repeated under his breath. But it wasn't just a repetition, it was recognition. Stared at his back, her mind racing. Something was wrong. Or maybe something had always been wrong, and this man held a piece of it. But right now, her belly was full, and she was still breathing. That had to be enough. She glanced down at her hand, the one with the old, frayed handkerchief tied around her wrist. For Lydia, she didn't know why, but the moment she'd seen Dakota's face, her mother's instincts had whispered, "You're getting close." And somehow, Deep inside her, the way a storm can feel close before it's even formed, Clara knew. This man knew something about her past. About her daughter. He had looked at her like he knew her. Because maybe he did. The fire snapped in the hearth, casting warm, flickering light against the cabin's log walls. Clara's bowl was nearly empty, her spoon scraping gently at the last few bits of carrot and venison. She hadn't eaten this well in weeks, maybe months. But the food did little to calm the storm churning inside her. Tako Day hadn't taken his eyes off her since she'd stepped inside. He didn't leer. He didn't smile. He didn't even blink too often. But every glance held something behind it, something unreadable, like sorrow or memory, like guilt. He finally sat across from her, arms crossed over his broad chest, watching the flames instead of her now. The silence was thick. She decided to break it. You looked at me like you knew me. He didn't flinch. Just said quietly, I do. Clara froze. Her hand tightened around the wooden spoon. From where? He looked at her then. Do. You remember Fort Ledger? Her breath caught. Of course she remembered. It was where everything had ended, where the soldiers had come, where her daughter had been taken. Her voice cracked. Yes, I was there when the attack happened. His jaw clenched. You weren't supposed to be. What? The soldiers said it was an abandoned trader's post. They were wrong. He looked at her again, and this time the pain in his eyes wasn't hidden. There was a woman, a baby. You. Clara gripped the table edge. Her voice dropped to a whisper. My daughter. Her name was Lydia. She was just a baby. They took her. I never saw her again. Takota's voice was low and careful. I remember you. Not from the fort, but after. When we were sent to scout the wreckage. I saw a white woman half conscious, bloodied. You held a tiny blanket and wouldn't let go. Clara's eyes burned. You saw me there? Why didn't you help? He looked away, shoulders rigid. I was ordered to leave the dead. And you, they thought you wouldn't live through the night. I shouldn't have, Clara whispered, tears gathering. But I did. And I searched every town and village since. Every trail, every whisper. Of an orphan child. I thought I saw her once, but it wasn't her. I've been looking for 6 years. Takota's voice cracked. I know, she blinked. How? He stood slowly and walked to a shelf. He pulled down something wrapped in deer hide. As he unraveled it, Clara's heart nearly stopped. It was a child's embroidered bonnet, sun faded and small. Her fingers trembled. That was Lydia's. My mother made it. He placed it gently before her. I kept it. I didn't. Know why? Maybe I thought I'd see you again. You knew I was alive? Not for sure. He hesitated. But I hoped. Clara's breath shook. Where is she, Takota? Please. If you know, don't spare me. I've waited too long for lies. He didn't answer right away. The weight in the room was too thick, the memories too sharp. Then finally he said, She's alive. I believe she is. Clara's world tilted. She was taken, Takota said. Not by soldiers. By warriors. Some of our own. They wanted revenge after what happened to our families. So when they found a white child left behind, they took her. Clara's voice was barely a whisper. They took my baby for revenge? He met her eyes, not to hurt her. Not at first. To raise her. To prove your people weren't the only ones who could destroy lives. But I couldn't live with that. I couldn't let them decide her fate. He looked down at the bonnet again, so I gave her to someone I trusted. A woman of the Comanche, a healer. She lived far to the south, near the Brazos. Lydia would have been safe with her, hidden, raised in peace. Clara stared at him, numb and raw. Why didn't you bring her back to me? You were gone when I returned, vanished. Soldiers were hunting the tribes. It wasn't safe. And later, I didn't know if you were still alive. She reached out and picked up the bonnet, holding it to her chest. 1,000 emotions tore through her: relief, fury, hope, confusion. She's alive, she whispered again. You're sure? Dakota nodded once. If anyone could keep a child safe, it's the woman I left her with. For the first time in years, Clara felt a flicker of something she hadn't dared feel. Hope. And yet, behind that hope was another feeling, just as strong. Fear. Because the man in front of her wasn't just a stranger offering kindness. He was tangled in the past she thought was long buried. He'd let her suffer, and now he might be her only way back to her daughter. The fire had died down to a low glow by the time Clara laid the empty bowl aside. Her stomach, once a hollow knot, now felt strangely full, comfortably full for the first time in days. But her thoughts were more unsettled than ever. She sat stiffly on the edge of the stool, the child's bonnet still in her hands, worn cotton pressed against her chest. The silence between her and Dakota was thick with memory and pain, his words from earlier ringing again and again in her mind. She's alive. I believe she is. She dared not believe too quickly. Hope had a cruel way of shattering when you held it too tight. Dakota stood by the window, his large frame half shadowed, half lit by the hearth's glow. He wasn't looking at her now. He was watching the darkened tree line outside. Listening, maybe. Thinking. Hiding something. Clara swallowed hard and finally broke the silence. Why now? He turned slightly, just enough for the fire to catch the edge of the scar across his jaw, one she hadn't noticed earlier. It looked old, deep, like something left behind in a fight that should have killed him. What do you mean? He asked. Why? Are you telling me now, after all these years? If you knew where she was, why wait? Dakota didn't answer right away. His shoulders rose and fell in a slow breath. When he finally looked at her, the mask he wore cracked just a little. And what she saw wasn't strength. It was shame. I thought I'd never see you again, he said quietly. And after what I'd done, I wasn't sure I deserved to see you again. Clara gripped the fabric of the bonnet tighter. You didn't take her, but you let them. He nodded once, solemn. I did. I was younger, angry. I had lost people. 2. That raid, it was about revenge. It wasn't supposed to include a child. But once they had her, I couldn't walk away. Not from her. Not from you. Clara looked at him sharply. You barely knew me. I remembered you, he said, voice firmer now. I remembered your face when we found the ruins of the fort. You were lying in the ashes, still holding a baby's blanket. There was blood on your hands and face, but you refused to let go of that cloth. He paused. I've never seen anyone fight to live the way you did. Not even warriors. And I thought, if a mother can survive that for her child, then maybe the least I could do was keep that child alive. Clara blinked, caught between anger and grief. You had no right to decide what happened to my daughter. No. He agreed. But I did. And I've lived with it every day since. The wind whispered against the wooden cabin walls. Clara exhaled, slow and shaky. Her voice came out barely audible. You said she's with a Comanche woman. Still alive. Still. Safe, he nodded. As far as I know. Her name is Nita. She was a healer. Widowed. She lost her own baby that winter. I think your daughter saved her too, in a way. Clara's gaze fell to the flames. It was all too much to take in. For years she had wandered, with nothing but Lydia's name on her lips and a ragged handkerchief on her wrist. Every town she passed through had given her another cruel dismissal, another locked door, another whisper behind her back, foolish girl, fallen woman, mad mother. But now sitting here in a stranger's cabin, fed by the very man who once stood on the other side of the war that tore her life apart, She had the first real thread that might lead her back to her child. Dakota stepped forward and knelt beside her. "You don't have to believe me, Clara," he said gently, "but I'll take you to her, if that's what you want." She looked at him, then really looked. There was no pleading in his eyes, no guilt-driven performance, just a kind of quiet resolve. A man who had carried a terrible choice, and who now offered to carry the burden with her. "I don't trust you," she whispered, voice trembling. "I wouldn't expect you to," he said, "but I want my daughter. Then I'll take you to her." She nodded once. It wasn't surrender. It was the first step on a long, painful road, and though she didn't know it yet, Clara's journey wasn't just toward her child, but toward something else. Toward understanding. Toward reckoning. And perhaps toward the one man who had never stopped remembering her. By morning, the storm had passed. The land outside was damp and quiet, blanketed with the scent of wet pine and soot from the cabin's chimney. Mist clung to the treetops, and everything felt strangely still, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Clara rose from the woven mat where she'd slept. Her body ached, and her legs felt heavy, but her mind was more alert than it had been in days. The stew from last night still lingered warm in her stomach, and the bonnet Dakota had given her lay folded beneath her sleeping roll, tucked close like a talisman. Dakota wasn't in the cabin when she woke. The door stood ajar, letting in cool morning air, and Clara could hear the soft clink of metal and wood outside. She hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to follow or just slip away. She could vanish into the trees. He had given her food, a place to sleep. Maybe that was enough, but then her hand brushed against the bonnet again, and her daughter's name echoed in her thoughts. Lydia. She couldn't run. Not yet. Instead, she stood, pulled her shawl tightly around her shoulders, and looked around the cabin. It was modest but sturdy. The walls were made of thick, dark logs, chinked with mud and straw. A shelf lined with dried herbs and carved wooden bowls stretched across one wall. In the corner, a bedroll lay neatly folded beside a small collection of belongings, a carved flute, a bow, a bundle of arrows wrapped in deer hide, and tucked beneath the window was something Clara hadn't noticed. The night before, a child's doll. She froze. It was small and hand-stitched, its cloth face faded and dirt-smudged. Its yarn hair had mostly unraveled, but the stitching on the dress, though worn, was careful, delicate. It looked just like the doll she had made for Lydia before her daughter was taken. Her breath caught. Slowly she knelt and picked it up. It was too much of a coincidence. Her fingers traced the hem of the dress, and she whispered, "Lydia." But how could it be? Had Dakota taken the doll from the baby and kept it? Or had Lydia kept it all these years? Her thoughts raced with impossible questions. The doll was too faded to tell for sure, but her mother's instinct, sharp and restless, pricked at her. That's when the cabin door creaked open. Clara stood quickly, hiding the doll behind her back. Dakota entered with an armload of chopped wood. His eyes flicked to her, then to her hands. "You found it," he said simply. She didn't lie. "Yes, where did it come from?" He hesitated. "It was hers." "Lydia's?" He nodded. "The Comanche woman gave it to me. Said she carried it everywhere when she was little. Slept with it. Guarded it." Clara's fingers tightened around the doll. Her heart thudded painfully. "I made this," she whispered. "I made it when I was still pregnant. Stitched it with blue thread because I didn't have pink. I told myself she'd be strong enough to like blue anyway." Dakota's face softened. "She was." Clara swallowed hard. "She is." She sat the doll gently back where she'd found it, as if placing a memory on an altar. Then she turned to the hearth and rolled up her sleeves. "You said I could clean in exchange for a meal." "I meant it." "You don't have to," he said. "I need to," she replied. She grabbed a broom from beside the door and began sweeping the packed earth floor. The motion was familiar, grounding. Every flick of her wrist stirred dust, pine needles, and broken bits of memory. As she worked, she hummed softly to herself, a tune she used to sing to Lydia when she was nursing her. Her voice cracked halfway through, but she didn't stop. Dakota moved around her quietly, chopping vegetables, adding water to a pot, and stoking the fire. For a long time, they said nothing. But the silence between them was no longer full of mistrust. It was full of something tentative, fragile, almost human. At one point, she paused and looked at him. Did she cry when they took her? Dakota didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was rough. No, she screamed. Clara turned away, her breath catching. She scrubbed at the table until her knuckles turned red, as if the act might erase the ache in her chest. But it didn't. Nothing ever had. By the time the sun reached its highest point, the cabin had been swept, the pots cleaned, the table wiped, and the air smelled of stew and smoke. Clara stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching the trees. Takode joined her. You didn't have to clean, he said again. I told you, she replied. I needed to. He looked at her, his eyes searching her face. You're stronger than I remember. She met his gaze. You don't know me. Maybe not, he said, but I want to. The words hung in the air between them, simple, honest, and dangerous. Clara turned back to the trees. I just want my daughter back, she said. Dakota nodded slowly. Then we start tomorrow. That night, the rain returned. Thunder rolled in over the mountains like a warning, low and distant at first, then louder sharp cracks that lit up the inside of the cabin in flashes of silver and shadow. Clara sat near the hearth, her hands cupped around a warm tin mug of herbal tea Dakota had brewed from dried mint and wild roots. It tasted sharp, earthy, like something her grandmother might have made back home in Kansas before the war, before Lydia, before everything had been stripped away. She glanced across the room where Dakota was sharpening a long hunting knife by lantern light. His movements were precise, quiet. She couldn't tell if he was ignoring her or simply lost in thought. He had barely spoken since dinner, and something in the set of his shoulders told her he was holding something back. Clara looked at the scar across his jaw again. In the firelight, it seemed even deeper. And then she saw it a second scar. This one ran down his forearm, long and brutal, as if something had nearly sliced the muscle in two. She didn't mean to speak, but the words slipped out. That scar, your arm. He paused mid-motion, looked down, then back at her. Clara leaned forward slightly. I've seen it before. That day, back at the fort. His brow furrowed. You don't remember me, she said, voice hoarse. Not from after, from before. Dakota lowered the blade. What do you mean? Clara set the mug down and wrapped her arms around her knees. Her voice shook, but she pressed on. There was a soldier. He was drunk. I was out gathering laundry. Behind the post, he cornered me. I screamed. I thought no one heard. Dakota's eyes didn't move. His face was unreadable. But someone did, she continued. An Apache warrior came out of the trees and grabbed the soldier from behind. There was a struggle. The soldier slashed him across the arm before running. The Apache didn't chase him. He just looked at me, then vanished into the trees. She let the memory settle in the air between them. I never told anyone. They would have said I imagined it, but I remember the scar. It was just like that, right there. She pointed gently to Dakota's arm. He slowly set the knife down and looked into the fire. His voice was a murmur. That soldier's name was McCullough. He'd already harmed 2 women in your fort. I had been tracking him for days. Clara's heart pounded. So it was you. Dakota nodded. I wasn't supposed to intervene. I was only sent to observe the fort, watch troop movement. But when I saw what he was doing to you, I couldn't turn away." Her throat tightened. "You saved me. And then years later, you saved my daughter." "I didn't think you'd remember me," he said. "I didn't forget," she whispered. "Not that face, not those eyes." For a moment, they just stared at each other. Thunder cracked again, but the air inside the cabin had shifted. It wasn't just survival holding them together now, it was something older. Something neither of them had named yet, but both had felt growing in the quiet spaces between words. "Why didn't you say anything?" Clara asked softly. "I didn't want you to think I was here to make things right just to soothe my own guilt," he said. "I've carried this scar and the memory for years, but I didn't think I deserved to say the words." Clara stood slowly and crossed to him. She didn't touch him, not yet, but she stood close enough to feel the heat of the fire bounce off his skin. "You don't need to make things right, Dakota," she said. "You already did. Not perfectly, not cleanly. But you tried, when no one else did." His eyes met hers, and for the first time since she'd arrived, he looked tired. Not physically, but deep down, where the soul carries things it was never meant to hold. "I'm not a hero," he said quietly. "I never asked for one," she replied. "I just need someone who won't lie to me. Someone who'll help me find my daughter." He nodded once. "Then we leave at first light," he said. "The Comanche woman lived near the Brazos 3 days' ride. Maybe 4. It won't be easy." "I didn't come this far for easy," Clara said. Lightning flashed again outside, lighting up the trees beyond the cabin. But inside, where? Two broken people shared fire and history. The storm felt far away. For the first time in 6 years, Clara would ride towards something not away. The trail south was raw and unforgiving, an endless stretch of dust, cactus, and burned memories. For 3 days, Clara and Dakota rode beneath a punishing sky, guided by the wide Brazos River as it twisted through dry canyons and fields scorched from summer heat. Clara hadn't ridden a horse in years, and her body ached from the saddle. But she didn't complain. She couldn't, not when every mile brought her closer to the one thing she thought she would never see again, her daughter. And yet, the closer they got, the more Dakota grew distant. He didn't speak much as they traveled. Not unless it was about the terrain or the dangers up ahead, coyote tracks, dust devils, a broken river crossing. His words were clipped, his gaze often locked on the horizon. But Clara could feel something pulling at him from within. Third night, they made camp beneath a cluster of mesquite trees. The moon hung low and orange above them, casting long shadows across the scrubland. Dakota built a small fire from dry twigs while Clara tended to her blistered hands. She finally broke the silence. "You've been quiet," she said. "More than usual." He didn't look up. "We're close. That's not what I meant." Dakota stared into the flames, the light flickering across his face. "There's something I need to tell you, before we get there." Clara's heart thudded. She set down her tin cup. "What is it?" He didn't speak at first. Just reached into his satchel and pulled out a folded strip of leather. Carefully, he unwrapped it, revealing a singed photograph. Clara's breath caught in her throat. It was old, weather-stained, and the edges were blackened by fire. But in the center, she could still make out the image, a young woman with soft eyes cradling a newborn, swaddled in a crocheted blanket. Her, with Lydia. It had been taken weeks before the attack. She reached out, trembling. Where did you get this?" Dakota passed it to her gently. "It was in the ashes, after the fort burned." Clara stared down at the image, her throat tightening. "But the fire destroyed everything, almost," he said. "I was with the group that returned to the ruins after the raid. The other warriors didn't care about what was left. But I searched. I was looking for something. Anything." "You found this," she whispered. "I found you first," he said quietly. You were buried under part of the bunkhouse wall, bleeding, barely breathing, but alive. You held a blanket in your arms, screaming a name that barely escaped your lips. Lydia, she said, tears stinging her eyes. Dakota nodded. They were going to leave you. They thought you were too far gone. But I wrapped you in a cloak and carried you down to the river. I cleaned the blood off your face. I thought you wouldn't make it. But I couldn't let you die alone. Clara's voice trembled. I never knew that. I thought I just woke up alone. You did, he said. I left you under a wagon near the trail. I didn't want to be there when the cavalry returned. I thought, if I left you close enough, someone might find you. She stared at him, the firelight flickering across her stunned face. You saved me twice. No, he said. I failed you twice. I saved you, but I didn't stay. I should have taken you with me, or told you where she was. But I didn't. Clara was quiet for a long time. Then she looked back down at the photo. The corners were brittle, but the image still held power proof that her love, her motherhood, had once been whole. Real, not just something she imagined through years of starvation and grief. I spent years thinking she was gone, she whispered. That maybe I'd just gone mad. No one believed me. Not the townsfolk, not the bounty hunters, not even the nuns in San Felipe. They said I must have miscarried, that there never was a baby. Dakota leaned forward, his voice low but firm. There was a baby. She was real, and she is real. Clara met his eyes. He added, and we're going to get her back. She wiped at her eyes, trying to be strong. Why are you doing this, Dakota? Why now? He looked away, then back at the photo. Because she isn't just yours anymore, he said. She's ours. Our responsibility. And because I've carried this truth like a fire in my chest for 6 years, I can't carry it alone anymore. Clara held the photo close and whispered, then don't. And for the first time that night, she saw him breathe easier, like a man finally unburdened by a truth long buried in the ashes. By the time they reached the Comanche woman's village, Clara's nerves had worn down to a thread. The trail had narrowed to a grassy path edged by cottonwoods, their leaves fluttering in the warm wind. Smoke rose from distant fires and children's. Voices echoed faintly in the canyon air. Somewhere close, a horse nickered, followed by the bark of a dog. It was the first true sign of life Clara had heard in years that didn't make her flinch. Tako day dismounted first and held her reins as she slid down, her legs unsteady from days in the saddle. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. This was it. He led her toward a modest dwelling built from clay and wood, the roof patched with woven reeds. Beaded charms swayed in the doorway. Clara's breath hitched. Dakota paused before knocking. Her name is Nita. She took your daughter in when I had nowhere else to turn. Clara nodded, but her body was stiff. Her hands balled into fists, and she just kept her? Never tried to find me? She didn't know your name. Didn't know if you were alive. And she thought because I told her that it was safer this way. She raised her as her own. Clara's voice cracked. You gave her my daughter. Dakota's jaw tensed. I didn't know what else to do. Soldiers were hunting us. If I'd tried to take her through Apache territory, she wouldn't have made it. Before Clara could respond, the door opened. A woman stepped into view, tall, elegant, wrapped in soft, earth-toned cloth. Her face was lined with time and sun, but her eyes were gentle and alert. She stared at Clara, then at Dakota, then back again. You brought her, Nita said calmly. Clara stepped forward. Her breath was shallow, her voice barely there. Where is she? Nita studied her for a long moment. Then she stepped aside and gestured into the house. Clara entered slowly. The air inside smelled of herbs and cornmeal. On the far side of the room, sitting cross-legged on a woven mat, was a girl maybe 6 or 7 years old. She was brushing the mane of a handmade doll, her expression focused and quiet. The moment Clara saw her, the world went silent. Golden brown skin, a round face, hazel eyes flecked with green and gold her eyes. Her daughter's Clara's hand flew to her mouth. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her knees buckled, and she fell forward onto the floor, sobbing. The girl looked up. She studied Clara the way only children can, with a mixture of curiosity and distance. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. But she clutched the doll tighter, holding it to her chest. "She doesn't remember you," Nita said gently behind her. She was still learning to walk when Dakota brought her. Clara reached out a trembling hand. "Lydia." The girl tilted her head. "My name's Ayoka." Clara blinked through tears. "That was your Comanche name, wasn't it?" Nita nodded behind her. "It means she brought happiness." Clara choked back a sob. "She did. She always did." Dakota stood silently in the doorway, watching everything. Nita walked to the child, whispered something in her ear. The girl hesitated, then slowly rose and crossed the room. She stopped a few feet away from Clara. "You're crying," she said simply. Clara nodded. "I'm sorry, it's just, I've missed you so much." Ayoka looked down at her doll. Then, to Clara's shock, she stepped forward and reached out, placing the doll gently into Clara's lap. Clara broke completely. It was the same doll, the one she'd made all those years ago. The yarn hair had faded to pale gray, and one eye had fallen off, but it was hers. The child spoke again. "You look like me," Clara laughed through her tears. "I'm your mother, sweetheart. You were taken from me when you were a baby. I've been searching for you ever since." The girl didn't move, didn't throw herself into Clara's arms the way she had dreamed so many nights. But she didn't pull away either. She stood there, blinking slowly, processing it all. Then quietly, uncertainly, she asked, You gonna stay?" Clara nodded, her hand reaching up to brush a lock of the girl's hair back. "Yes, I'll never leave again." Behind her, Dakota turned to walk outside. He knew Clara needed this moment alone, but just before he stepped out, Clara called his name. He turned. Her eyes locked with his. They were filled with 1,000 things she wasn't ready to say. "Thank you," she whispered. He gave a single nod, then stepped into the sun, giving mother and daughter the space they'd been denied for too long. The stars blinked quietly above the Comanche village that night, scattered across a velvet black sky. Coyotes howled far off in the hills, but inside Nita's home, all was still. Except for Clara's heart racing, aching, confused. She sat beside the girl, her girl, watching her sleep on a woven mat. Lydia, Ayoka, whatever name she answered. To now she was hers. Clara had run her fingers through her soft hair, kissed her brow as she drifted to sleep. But even in that closeness, something had grown between them, the kind of distance that comes not from miles but from years lost. Dakota sat outside by the fire, but Nita remained inside, grinding dried corn at the table, humming low under her breath. Clara finally turned to her. "She's mine," Clara said softly, clutching the edge of the blanket. "But I don't think she knows what that means." Nita paused her work. "She knows love," she replied. "And for a child, love is where home is, where trust is." Clara nodded slowly. "You were there. You fed her, dressed her, taught her how to speak, how to braid. I saw the way she looked at you today, like you were the one who brought her into this world." "I didn't," Nita said. Her tone wasn't defensive, just calm and firm. "But I didn't let her be swallowed by it either." That truth hit Clara like a soft hammer, quiet, heavy, and deserved. She looked down. "I should thank you, but I don't know how. I've dreamed of holding her again for so long that I forgot. She might not even want me." "She doesn't know what she wants yet," Nita replied, walking over and sitting beside her. She's still trying to understand what just happened. You came out of nowhere. You look like her, cry like her, even smell like the memories she didn't know she had. Clara chuckled faintly. I probably smell like 3 days on horseback in desperation. Nita gave a rare smile. That too. They sat in silence a while longer. Then Clara said, if I asked to take her, would you stop me? Nita didn't answer immediately. Her eyes softened. She is not a possession to be claimed. She is a person. A small one, but with a heart of her own. I would not stop you. But I would ask you what is best for her, not for you, not for me. Clara swallowed hard. That's the thing. I don't know. I only know that losing her once nearly broke me. I don't think I could survive losing her again, Nita nodded. Then don't rush her. Let her find you. Let her decide who she trusts with her dreams. Clara looked over at her daughter again. The girl's breathing was even, her arms wrapped around the old doll. In the quiet, she whispered the name again. Lydia. But the girl stirred, mumbled something in Comanche, and clutched the doll tighter. It wasn't rejection, but it wasn't recognition either, and Clara felt that truth deeper than any wound she'd ever suffered. The next morning, Dakota waited outside the home, ready to ride. The horses were saddled. The sun painted gold across the prairie. Clara stepped outside, her travel bag still empty. She's not ready, she said simply. Dakota nodded. He didn't question her. I want to take her with me, she added, but I'd be a stranger, ripping her from everything she knows. I can't do that. So what now? He asked. I stay a little longer. Help Nita around the village. Let her see me. Learn my voice, my laugh, my tears. Then, maybe one day, she'll crawl into my lap on her own. Dakota studied her. You're a strong woman. No, Clara said. I was just broken for too long. Now I'm piecing myself back together one moment at a time. Dakota placed a small bundle in her hands: dried fruit, smoked meat, a small carved wooden comb. In case you need to trade for anything, she smiled at him. You still carry everything in your saddle. I don't forget people I owe, he said. Clara's eyes met his, warm with something that wasn't quite forgiveness, but wasn't far from it either. Thank you, Dakota, for not walking away. He mounted his horse. Send word when she calls you Mama. I'd like to be there. And then he rode off, dust rising in his wake. As Clara turned back to the quiet little home where a new chapter, uncertain, fragile, but full of hope, was just beginning. The morning Clara first heard the child cry out Mama broke her heart in half. The call wasn't meant for her. Lydia Ayoka had scraped her knee while running barefoot through the tall grasses behind the home. It was a shallow cut, but the pain had startled her. She rushed inside with tears streaking her dusty cheeks and screamed the name that came easiest, clearest, safest. Mama. Mama. Nita came quickly, arms open, voice soothing, movements practiced. She crouched and lifted the girl with effortless familiarity, holding her tight against her chest while brushing the hair from her face. She, little one, it's all right. It's just a scratch. Clara stood frozen in the doorway. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. And her fingers white-knuckled around the wooden broom she'd been using dug into the handle like it might hold her together. She'd been living in the village for weeks now, earning her place, helping Nita grind corn, prepare hides, boil herbs. She slept on the floor by the hearth, close enough to feel the warmth from her daughter's tiny body, but never close enough to claim her as her own. They laughed together sometimes, played with beads or brushed the horse's mane. But Lydia never called her anything. Not Ma, not Clara, not even Lady. She was just there, an echo of something the child didn't remember but felt tugging in her bones. Now, standing in that doorway, Clara understood something cruel and undeniable. She had given birth to the girl, but she was not her mother, not in the way that mattered to the child. Tears prickled at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not now. She turned slowly and walked out into the wind, down the slope where the wildflowers grew, and fell to her knees. She stayed there until the sun passed its highest point in the sky. Nita found her later. Clara was still sitting in the field, legs drawn up, arms hugging them like a child. The wind rustled her hair, and the bees buzzed lazily around the blossoms, but she didn't look up. "I'm sorry," Nita said gently. "For what?" Clara murmured. "For not being you." Clara gave a bitter smile. "She called you Mama, not me." Nita sat beside her. "That doesn't mean she won't call you that one day." "She shouldn't have to learn to call me Mother," Clara sighed. "She should know. Feel it." "She does feel something," Nita replied. "She doesn't run from you. She watches you when she thinks you're not looking. And she never lets go of that doll when you're near. The one you made her." Clara blinked back tears. "I don't know how to be patient with this." Nita was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, "Do you want her to remember who you were? Or do you want her to love who you are now?" That question pierced deeper than any blade. "I just want her to come to me," Clara whispered, freely. "Not because I said I'm her mother. Not because anyone told her to. Just because she wants to," Nita nodded. "Then you're already doing what you need to." That night, Clara sat alone by the fire outside. She hadn't eaten much. The village quieted early, and the stars appeared one by one like promises waiting to be kept. Then quiet footsteps approached. She looked over her shoulder. It was Lydia, in her nightclothes, holding the battered doll tight in her arms. Clara straightened up, surprised. "Shouldn't you be sleeping, little one?" The girl stepped closer, eyes flickering with something unreadable. "You were sad," she said simply. Clara nodded. "A little, yes." The girl walked until she stood right beside her. Then, after a pause, she sat down, leaning lightly against Clara's arm. Clara's breath caught. After a few quiet minutes, the child said, "You smell like the doll." Clara smiled through a tear. "That's because I used to hold it. When you were a baby." Lydia turned her face to Clara's shoulder. "I don't remember, but I think I knew you in my dreams." Clara's heart nearly broke all over again. "You did," she whispered. "You did, sweetheart." The girl didn't speak again. She just closed her eyes and leaned fully against her, trusting her, resting on her, letting the bond form like a sunrise, slow, quiet, and undeniable. She hadn't called her Mama yet, but maybe tomorrow. The autumn wind moved softly through the village, curling around the drying corn and stirring the scent of wood smoke in the air. Change was coming, it always did, but this time it brought something Clara hadn't dared to hope for. It had been nearly 3 months since she arrived. No longer a stranger, she was now part of the daily rhythm, hauling water, gathering herbs with the elder women, helping mend garments, singing softly to the children when they cried. She never claimed Lydia as hers, never forced the past upon her. She simply stayed. And slowly, Lydia Ayoka began to stay too. Some days she would hold Clara's hand without being asked. Other times she'd crawl into her lap and ask questions. About the old world Clara came from, about barns and chickens, about sewing buttons and baking bread. One afternoon, she asked what the stars looked like from Clara's porch before she was born. They looked the same, Clara had said, stroking her hair. But lonelier. Lydia didn't answer. She just laid her head against Clara's chest and closed her eyes. That morning, Clara was helping Nita prepare bundles for the coming winter, drying meat, tucking thick hides into storage. Lydia played nearby with 2 village boys, giggling as she chased them with a stick, pretending it was a sword. Then, out of nowhere, The girl ran toward Clara and tugged at her sleeve. "Can you braid my hair the way you do it?" she asked, breathless. Clara dropped the thread she'd been knotting and smiled. "Of course." Lydia sat on the grass and handed her the small wooden comb, the one Dakota had given Clara the day he left. Clara's fingers worked carefully, parting, twisting, weaving. The girl was quiet until the final tie was fastened. Then she whispered, "You smell like the doll again." Clara laughed softly. "Maybe that's how you know I'm real." Lydia turned to look at her, serious now. "You're real because—" "You didn't go." Clara blinked, heart thudding. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" The girl looked down. "I had a mother before you." "But she let go." Clara didn't speak. Her throat ached with the weight of it. Lydia's voice dropped to a whisper. "But you stayed. You didn't let go." A single tear slipped from Clara's eye. She knelt beside her daughter, cradled her face gently. "No, baby, I won't ever let go again." "Not unless you ask me to." Lydia touched Clara's cheek, wiped the tear away with a small thumb. Then, for the first time, she said it, barely above a breath, but unmistakable. "Mama," Clara gasped softly. Everything inside her, every wound, every scar, every empty space that had haunted her filled in that single heartbeat. She didn't need the past anymore. She didn't need a court to declare it, or a name to prove it. Her child had chosen her. That night, the village gathered for the harvest fire, a celebration of endurance, survival, and family however it was formed. Clara and Lydia sat together. Beneath a blanket as the drums beat, stories were told, and laughter swirled under the stars. Nita sat nearby, eyes warm but shadowed. Later, when the fire burned low and most had gone to sleep, Clara rose and walked toward Nita. She knelt before her, not out of servitude but respect. "She called me Mama," she whispered. Nita smiled gently. "I heard. I want you to know. I will never forget what you gave her. What you gave me." Nita reached out and took Clara's hands. "You didn't take her from me. You brought her home. Even if her home looks different now." Clara nodded, eyes wet again. "She still loves you." "I know," Nita said, "and I love her. But I see now she needs you." They sat in silence, side by side, two mothers who had both lost and given, and healed in their own ways. When the frost came weeks later, Clara and Lydia packed their things. It was time to return east. Back to the land that once held only memories, but would now carry something new, a future. The whole village came to see them off. Nita kissed Lydia's brow and whispered a prayer. Clara hugged her tightly, this time without shame, and promised to write even if the letters were slow to arrive. As they rode away, Lydia waved behind her with one hand, the doll tucked in two. Her other arm. Clara looked over and smiled. "You ready to go home, little one?" Lydia looked up at her, face clear in the sunlight. "We are home," she said, "because we're together."